Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your patience with little technical issues that we had. So please mute yourself as you come in. Okay, I think we have everyone. So once again, welcome to the 27th Agile Lean Coffee. Today, we'll talk about Agile in education. And we will be recording this session today. And later on, we will post that on the meeting, the recording, and it may be posted on YouTube and shared over social media channels. So please have that in mind if you want to turn on the camera or for your names, as it will be available publicly. So we'll start the recording session. It's already started. So with this, I'm the host for today, Miloš, a partner coach for Agile Humans. And this evening, it's my pleasure to introduce Arno. Arno works as an Agile transformation coach and has a strong passion for learning, training, and education. As such, he has co-authored the Agile Scrum Guide together with Rini van Solingen and Billy Reinites. I hope I pronounced that well. And he is the co-founder of the worldwide initiative Agile in Education. He helps companies to grow high-performing teams and to adapt to a flexible and value-driven way of working with a strong passion for innovation and creativity. He coordinates Agile Scrum implementation at schools and the training of teachers. Furthermore, he is responsible for liaison with the international institutes and the educational experts, as well as Agile Scrum plans abroad. So welcome, Arno.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really glad to be here and seeing that there's so many people interested in this topic. Really looking forward to share with you what I know on this topic. So in the meantime, what I'll do is I'll see if I can share my screen. Let me check if that will work. Okay. I think, Miloš, you have to allow me to do so because the host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Yeah, just a second.
Sure. So in the meantime, if you're doing that, Miloš, I would love to start with a question because a little confession from my side. I hate these type of sessions, and this is no offense to you, but I prefer to be in a real life setting where I can see you, where I can interact with you, where we can have a good discussion. So this is always second best to me. So therefore, I'm really curious, like who we have in the room. So for this, I have two questions which I would like you to post in the chat. And the first question is, and that helps me to understand how deep I should go into certain topics, is do you have a background in agility and Scrum? And you could just reply with a yes or a no, or just the why and the N, just to give me a bit of sense, and also for you amongst one another, how much experience there is in the room. I see a lot of yeses coming in already. No, some yeses again. Okay, so I guess we have a little bit of a mixed group, some yeses and some no's. So there's always a chance of trying to keep the balance, making it not too complicated for those who have no background, but also keeping it interesting enough for those who do have a background. So I will touch up some of the concepts. I would say we have plenty of time to discuss. So if there's anything you don't understand, please write it in the chat box. Either we're going to discuss it after the presentation, or if it's an urgent topic and you say, okay, if we don't get this answered now, then we cannot continue, then we will answer it on the fly. Okay. My next question.
Sorry, you should be able to share now. So look at maybe the three dots in more, if you can.
Let me check. How should we share now?
Okay.
So is my image visible, Scrum in the classroom?
I see it.
Cool, cool, excellent. Now the only thing is now I'm lost the chat, I think, but we'll figure that out how that goes. My second question is, which of you people in this call has any experience apart from yourself being involved in education when you were younger, but who works in education or who has a relationship there or does some voluntary work or whatever, just to give me a bit of an understanding. Is like, okay, how many people do we have in the group with an educational background or a strong preference?
So I'll look at, I'm monitoring the chat. So co-owner of a private high school.
Nice.
Trying to launch a startup in education tech. Does that count? Full-time person?
Yeah. Sure does.
Okay. And we have a yes also, background in education.
Again, a bit of a mixture then, I would say.
Scrum Master in learning, formal language teacher.
Nice. Okay, that's good, because we have some people with knowledge on Scrum and Agile, which I would say is about roughly 50-50, and we have a similar, maybe slightly off, but roughly about 50-50 also, or maybe 70 on education and Scrum, or education and non-education, I should say. Now, good learning always starts with having the right objectives. So what do you want to learn? So for me, it's really, although I have this fixed presentation, I'm pretty flexible. I want to make sure that whenever we wrap up this session, that I've been able to sort of accommodate your needs as much as possible. So you would really do me a big favor if you could write down in the chat with just maybe 1 or 2 learning objectives. So what do you want to get out of this session? So it helps me to get a better understanding, and it also could help us later on when we're going to do the Q&A, that we can reflect on the learning objectives of you to make sure as much as possible that we have covered these. So if you could take a minute or so, 2 minutes, to put them in the chat box. That would really.
Okay, so in the meantime, I can read you the other answers. So we do have a quite diverse group. It's smaller in number, but so also part-time teaching at local college, part-time in education, training and teaching experience, PMP, ETIL, business operations, and working in a university. I'm also personally very interested in that, and have coached people that are creating e-learning modules in Agile transformation. So good audience, I would say, we have attracted here, and very diverse.
Okay, it's good to hear that we have the right people at the table, that at least we can continue. So if we wouldn't have the right people, then we might have just, be very agile and say, okay, let's stop. I just want to share with you a little story, and this is a bit of a personal touch for myself, and it sort of it's really about what motivates me and where I come from, and how that relates to education, and why I think it's so important. So if you look at this picture, I mean, this is me being in my very early days, a very happy baby. I was born on a sunny day in September, and I was curious as hell. I was discovering everything. I think I called it curiosity. My parents called it more like naughtiness and stuff like that. But okay, we had a different opinion. And then when I grew a little bit older, then I started changing my diapers for some toys, and I was really I was venturing out. I was always, I had a strong passion for farming and everything that could be driven. As you can see here, my being on my tractor, being outside, and now more than 50 years later, I still have a very strong passion for the outdoors and driving and traveling. Then again, it's not so strange if you practice that at a very young age. Now, I'm always saying with this picture that this is me being agile, and people say, "Whoa, hold on a second. What does this have to do with agility?" And then I say, well, let me be clear on this. No one has learned to walk by a plan. And so for all of us, the learning process in our younger days was about little experiments, full of inspection and adaptation. And for me, I had quickly figured out that the tablecloth wasn't very much of a support when trying to walk. And the corner of the oak table was not a very good landing spot as well. So it was a very agile process, and I guess you must have a lot of examples yourself as well. But then things started to change. I think it was about 5 or 6 years old. I had to go to elementary school, and I graduated kindergarten, and it was time for the real work. And that was quite a change. So all of a sudden, you had to sit in rows, obey, all that sort of stuff, stop experimenting. And, it's no wonder I always looked forward to the weekend and the holidays. So this continued till the end of elementary school. Then we got tested and did some other education stuff. Not good enough to go to university, and then I ended up finally, after a lot of years, going to university. And it was only then, where I felt that I could have my creativity and my curiosity was being valued. So it was no longer about providing the single right answer, and it had taken me many years to get there. And so I did all sorts of education in between, and it was then the seed got planted, and I thought, I'm always saying, that I didn't succeed because of education, but I succeeded despite education, I was going to say. And for me, it's learning is about doing things you like, experimenting, having freedom. So it's there where I sort of really became aware. And once I finished university, I became a project manager. After a while doing this, then I found out that the way we organized work was not very respectful to people. I think that's about 25 years ago. I founded my own company, and I was working in IT, and I said, at the end of the line, it's always about people. And there's a funny link with this organization where I'm doing the talk now. Because when I founded my company, I called it Humans with a Z at the end, because I believe in the end, it's all about people, and it's about helping people, thinking from a people perspective. And being on that journey, I got in touch with agility, and I really loved it that much that I thought, wow, this is really great. I made the transformation to become an agile coach there. I really like the simplicity, and when I look back and then learned things about having an MVP and stuff like that, and I thought, an MVP, my whole career had been an MVP, because when I was at school, I was always going for the lowest grades and then going to the next thing, it's building on one thing on top of another. So I really like the simplicity, and it started dawning upon to me that I thought, wow, all of a sudden, I'm here. I work with people in the age bracket, let's say anywhere between 30 and 55 years old. And I have to unlearn them things they had as a natural skill until they got to elementary school. And I thought, my God, how many years of waste in between, and how much maybe needless effort we have to do in unlearning people things and bringing them back to their natural skills of experimenting, being autonomous creatures, enjoying learning rather being afraid of management and stuff like that. So I think it's about that time that I said, okay, I chatted with my son. He was, I think, 15 years old at that time. And then I had a very good friend of mine who was also an Agile coach. He was a professor at the University of Delft. And he was texting me that there was this guy, Willy Wijnands, in the Netherlands. And he was doing something with education and agility. And I said, wow, this is where I want to be part of. So that's how I got involved with the whole educational stuff. And the first thing he said, well, we need to, I said, what can I help you with? And he said, let's write a guide. And I thought, oh no, I'm not a very good writer. I don't like writing at all. But hell, if this is what's needed. So I ended up booking myself a private cottage for the long weekend, locked up, had a nice bottle of wine with me, and I started writing. And then afterwards, we reviewed with Willy and Rini. And that's how we got involved there. So just a bit of a background where I come in. And if I'm training teachers, I'm always saying, I'm an educational specialist. And they go, oh, what have you done then? I said, no, I've seen them all as a customer, from the customer perspective. So I've seen so many schools, so many institutions, and it was only until university that I really liked it. And I thought, this is great. And my passion is that to help people to have that similar experience before they drop out. And because not everybody has the option of going to a university, either financially or maybe not the capacities or just bad luck, you know. So I mean, I was quite pervasive, but I was also, I would say, a bit lucky there. So, you know, just to give you a bit of an idea on the background now.
And we have people saying amen to that.
Well, there must be people out there, and there must be a lot of people out there. And when I see them, young students, and I think, I wish for you that you would have the opportunities I had, and that you're going to enjoy education as well. I'm always saying, I love learning, but I hate to be educated. That's my motto, because, you know, everybody internally has a born-in curiosity and a burning passion for learning. It's just I'm just maybe blowing it up a little bit, but it's mainly due to the system. So there's no bad people. It's just the system we have around it, which is probably not best geared towards our current education. But let's dive into that for a second. So why do we need to change education? And maybe we don't. So let's have a quick check there. What in my opinion, the drivers are. So if we look at the difference between the 20th and the 21st century, then we could see that, you know, there was like the old series, we had the industrial revolution, which had a great impact on how we organized work and our working environment. And so we had the Taylorism, breaking it up in little chunks, you know, the lines, people, basically operators. And this was also reflected in the educational system, because we needed operators. We didn't need very highly skilled people, just people who would have enough understanding to read instructions or to get the instructions, but it was also very much related on discipline. Then, if you look at now, and you probably must have seen some of these fancy offices, it's a different environment. We have startups, we have completely different environment. We have very open, creative offices. I'm not going to say it's everywhere the same, but things are very much opening up, and it's really changing big time. So creativity is one of the most sought skills, or predict sought skills for the nearby future. Now, if we look at the current education, and this is just a standard photo, then I still see very big resemblance of the old school lines. You know, it's like there's some sort of hierarchy in there. And you know, if we look at it from two pictures, from one from 1940 and one from 2040, I'm maybe a little bit generalizing here because I hear some good stories as well. So don't get me wrong if I'm trying to make my point a little bit too strong here. But you know, in 100 years, then it makes me think like, whoa, are we geared towards what our children should do later on? Eh? So, and if we look at the World Economic Forum, they're predicting what skills is needed. Then you can see there's a huge shift taking place, whereas they say we need to emphasize on complex problem solving, critical thinking, and creativity. And creativity was in 2015 at the bottom of the list. Thank God it was in the top 10. Now it's in the top 3. That should, in my opinion, also be reflected in the educational system, because if this is where our children will go to, then this is what they would need to have in their skill set. Thankfully, there is such a thing called 21st century skills. And for those of you who have been in the educational system, they know it. And it consists of four elements. It's about critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creativity. And so, and you can see that, and there's some more details. So this is luckily pretty aligned with what the Social Economic Forum had predicted what they need. So, yeah, the students should have these skills apart from the subject matter expertise, because I read somewhere is that the decay of skills is really rapidly going down. So whatever you learned today was, you know, when we were at school, it could last us for 15 years, and nowadays maybe 2 or 3 years. So you need to have some more generic skills that will last you longer, to be adaptable for whatever is going to change, because a lot will change. And so the thing is now, you would think, what's the problem? Because if this is what we need to do, what's stopping us? And what I found amazingly interesting is that whenever I talk with teachers, they know everybody's talking about 21st century skills. They know that they have to address it, that they have to change, but they don't know how. They don't know how to tie it in with their curriculum, because how are you going to do all these things when you still have this large curriculum of things you need to do? It's like, oh, we need to do something with critical thinking, collaboration, communication, creativity, on top of all the rest. And so if you look at the 21st centuries, the skills are more detailed, then we have an overview here, which is, by the way, a nice hybrid version of Dutch and English. In the center, it says 21st century skills in Dutch, and all the rest around it is in English. So you see all these skills which are needed. So any questions so far? Any urgent things you would like to know?
So I could read the learning objectives. We got a couple, if you want.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so find out more about Agile in education format, 2 times. How to get everyone involved in learning, teachers, managers, students, on board to try out Agile for education. Find ideas to combine traditional with Agile, which you just stated as a problem, right, for many people in education. And learn how to be better at teaching students at college, but also to be better at onboarding new colleagues at work and helping them to learn. And as a passionate learner, I hope to get some tips to be better learner myself. and we had a couple of comments around unlearning concept as an interesting thing. And Carl mentioned that some of these things are worse off now during COVID, right? So especially the rows in the desks, right? So maybe Carl, you want to chip in and maybe talk a little bit around that part.
Yeah, I can do.
Yeah.
It just reminded me when you showed the pictures of the desks in rows and the way that, you know, some classrooms are configured, and there's this whole idea called built pedagogy by this researcher called Monahan, and she talks about the way that rooms are configured reflects the power relations between, you know, the teachers and the facilitator. And I think that also applies to, you know, Scrum, and when you're working with a team, and even now in this space we're in now, because it's strangely constructed in a way that puts people in different spaces, as you said. So I know it's a bit obvious, you know, that the way you set up the room affects the way the teaching occurs, but it really, really does. And she also Monahan talks about people escaping from the rooms on their mobile phones. Rather than bringing stuff in, they escape and go out, kind of thing.
Yeah. And just to give you a tip of the iceberg here is that if we do the Scrum in the classroom, they work in groups of 4, and you know they put the desks together. It brings some other dynamics because well, yeah, if you have more collaboration in a classroom, obviously you're going to have more noise in the classroom, and that might be sometimes a challenge for other people, but it does something with the energy. Yeah. So if they start working in groups and all of a sudden it's okay for them to use their phone to look up stuff, and you know, to have a chat with one another, and you know, to walk outside the classroom, because all of a sudden it's no longer about the structure, but it's more about the result and about the learning. And I've seen some really nice examples of that, how that works. So
yeah, there's a couple of comments about curriculum as well, you know, and our curriculums, there's always too much in the curriculum, or there's not enough time. Do you find that as an issue with introducing Scrum? People say, well, this method takes too long, which is the antithesis of Scrum, really, isn't it?
This is a good one. What we experience is that at the beginning you need to invest some time to make the children understand what the new way of working is, and that feels very counterintuitive because you already have a feeling that you don't have enough time. So how are you going to deal with that? But in the end, it turns out that if you invest like 3 or 4 lessons about that, it pays back. So our experiences are that apart from the students get slightly better grades, which I think is completely irrelevant because we still don't measure what's really important is how have you improved your learning skills and not your content skills. But what I like, and I think that's a very good indicator, is that once they learn to work this way, they finish early. And that I think is a very interesting finding, is if you don't try to put them all through the same batch, but just give them the boundaries, let them self-organize. And the funny thing is, there's one of the things we work with in Scrum. It's called the burn down chart, and you draw a line. It's the ideal line, and if you can just visualize if you go too slow or if you go too fast, the impact that has on the children is amazing, because if they go faster than what they should do, then that encourages them to go even more fast. If they go slower than the ideal line, that encourages them to go even more fast. I think that's a very weird finding, and it doesn't involve any intervention from a teacher.
Do you think, Arno, do you think, you said, I think you said the scores don't matter because we're not looking at the right things. So do you think assessment needs to change just because as part of the putting Scrum into the middle of, you know, the pedagogic approach is Scrum, isn't it? And then you've got the curriculum at one end and the assessments at the other end. So ideally, you know, those two things should change as well, do you think?
Yeah, I fully grasp the line, you know, say, okay, are we measuring the right thing? That's what I brought up. Whether that means that we don't need assessments anymore, I'm not too sure, because I have always, when I train teachers, then I always have a very creative solution. If we get into a discussion, because then I always advise them, why don't you have your students create an assessment? Because if they create an assessment, they clearly need all the knowledge. So you give them some boundaries and create an assessment, and you could even do a peer review with the groups in the class who made the best assessment. And you don't have to take an assessment because they clearly have already demonstrated the knowledge that they need for setting up an assessment. And it creates ownership. It's still there as an assessment, but you don't really formalize it. As long as you make sure that the certain elements that you think what they need to know, that they need to master, are in there, they can do it themselves.
So you could change. What I'm thinking about is changing formal assessment. You could argue that you can evidence that people have learned things through any method, and you can get rid of the content testing kind of recall.
Yeah,
that people have to do at the moment.
Yeah, so what you said earlier, Carl, is like you know, there's this curriculum and there's a lot of pressure because there's too much to be done. It is, for me, it's an example of that we are trying to think for them how the knowledge should be absorbed, and we try that to define structures and tests and work in batches. Whereas if we would say, okay, guys, these are the objectives, these are the minimal things we would like to see, and show us that you've applied them and how you do that, that frees up a lot of unnecessary time for creating structures. And so that's on the educational side. Cool. It's also a lot more fun for students when they're not forced in this single direction with all these, you know, with all these hoops where they have to go through at a certain time. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be gained. And there is an example, and I don't know if you're familiar with it or somebody heard of it, but it's called Agora, and it's in the Netherlands. And this is where the children, I would say age 11, 12, come in, and there is no curriculum. So they're just going to design what they want to learn on, and as they go, they design their own curriculum. And they're still experimenting with that, but I would say that that's the future of education. And we should offer them not the knowledge, because the knowledge is abundant. It's there. You know, when I went to school, there was an encyclopedia, or you could go to the library, or you could ask the teacher. Those were the three things. And most of the information was very much coming from your teacher. So it depended which school you went. But nowadays, the information is available everywhere. So the only thing we need to teach them is sort of, can we create a structure so that you can maximize your learning capacity and first and foremost, enjoy the ride, you know, because you're only young once, and enjoy the learning process.
And it seems that our participants agree from what I can see from the chat. So there's an interesting discussion going on, so maybe we can bring it in. That the students really, what they want is results, not so much the assessments, but results in something practical. And the idea of the content can be online courses or resources, but the teacher should migrate towards mentoring and even coaching. So there is an idea of what's your goal? How do we establish the process, as you mentioned earlier, for it, just like in coaching? And then how would you measure if you succeeded or not in whatever goal you've chosen for yourself? So that would be a pure coaching approach to it. And then if it's a group, it's facilitation. Any comment on that?
Yeah, well, there is one structure, and I think it also relates here to assessment. And it also relates to the coaching aspect. I don't know if any of you is familiar with the Agile Coaching Institute. The Agile Coach has a number of fields and to focus on, and four of them are mentoring, coaching, teaching, and what's the other one? Facilitating. Mm-hmm. Now, what we see traditional is that we don't call them teachers for nothing, you know, so the most people have the focus on teaching. I'm a personal believer that there will be a focus far more towards mentoring and coaching. So they step out of the learning process. And to give you a very good example, as I said earlier, so when they start on a period or on a project, first thing we do is we let them form groups of four with a mixed skill set. So they write down the skills, or they write down the skills they want to work on. So we want to have we want to have diversity in the group. And the other thing is, particularly on a certain age bracket, where you have to be careful with that they're not going to sit with friends and with boyfriends and girlfriends. So you want to take that apart. So we have group. Once they have that skill set, they start working in groups. So let's say we have a classroom of 20 people, which is pretty small for nowadays, but then they would have like 5 little groups. Now the power of knowledge within that group is far greater than you would expect. So let's say one of the people, person A in the first group, has a problem and he doesn't know how shall I tackle it. Then it's the law of 4. Then I say, okay, first think and see if you can come up with yourself. Look it up. Secondly, you have a group. There's 3 people around you. Ask it. Thirdly, if your group is blocked, then look around, because and I'll show you later on, all the canvases are in the room. So it's transparent so you can look and maybe look at a team who is not blocked. So the knowledge might be in your classroom. So reach out to that team and ask for clarification if they can help you. And only after you've done these 3 steps, you go to step 4, ask the teacher. So you can imagine that there is far less pressure on the teacher. I'm also very confident that this is giving also sort of economy of scale in terms of how many students you can deal with, because you don't have to do all the one-on-ones, because there's a wisdom of the crowd. If one doesn't know, doesn't mean that there's not 29 others who might have a solution for that. So that's one of the approaches there. So I really strongly believe, and I fully agree, that teaching will become coaching more and more, and you should provide a framework for learning. And what we do with Scrum is a very, I would say, it's the mechanical part of the framework. To add on that, you need things like psychological safety. That's also part of the framework where they can learn. Clarity, clear boundaries, respect, non-violent communication, all those sort of things create a environment, and then, you know, it's like growing a crop. You don't have to pull the grass up. As long as you provide the soil, rich soil and water, it will grow. And I think there's a lot to be gained there, I would say. Yeah. So anything else in the chat?
Sorry, so I was muted. So I added the reference to EduScrum, the links, and to the Agile coaching framework that you mentioned.
Yeah, cool. Nice. Nice.
I can also say that what you said as a Scrum Alliance certified coach, I can see that even going in Agile coaching space, that we, even when we do classes, now it's more, now you can have classes delivered as through coaching and mentoring.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, that's how I deliver, or when I teach others how to work in Scrum and how to be a Scrum Master or Agile coach. So I can see that penetrating everywhere. And it's very similar to organizations when you say, you know, when we harness the wisdom of the crowd and teach the crowd to first go to team members and others, we can have fewer teachers, and in organization that translates, we can have fewer managers because they're more concerned about how can I create the process and the environment for learning and the empowerment for that. And one more thing that I wanted to maybe hear your opinion on is that when we talked about active listening, nonviolent communication, collaboration, I kind of feel that now those things are no longer the edge, but they are almost becoming basic skills that you need to have. If you don't have those, you're just not going to get anywhere.
So true, fully true. Yeah. So and the good thing is, but I will touch upon that a little bit later if I try to briefly explain the framework, is that by applying this framework of an agile mindset and Scrum as the framework, you will touch upon all these 21st century skills. And so to give you an idea, maybe shall I do a little fast forward to some sheets. Then take a good mental picture of this picture here with the media literacy, computer literacy is less relevant, but problem solving, creative thinking, critical thinking, self-direction, social cultural skills, cooperation, communication. So I would dare to say that all of these are just simply part of the framework. And let me quickly go to that framework. Let's hold on a second. First of all, let me do the canvas. I'm just going one too fast. So this is the canvas, and this is a very strong artifact because this is capturing all the information and creating all the transparency which you need to have in self-organizing learning. So what do? We have the project, we have a team name, we have the team members there. We create this canvas where we have the stories. I would nowadays call that the learning objectives. So what do we want to achieve? And they come together with acceptance criteria. Okay, how are we going to validate that? Because this is always a problem. If you tell somebody to do something, you need to be specific on how you're going to validate it. What do you want? How will it be measured? Then the next thing what children will do is, based on these stories, they will break it up in little chunks of work. So the good thing is, once they do that, they're going to do the work twice. Because first, they will do the mental exercise. They're going to go through all the work they think they need to do. So they'll do their planning. What do we need to do? So they're going to break it up in work, estimate how much work it will be, and then they're going to execute the work. So they're going to do it the second time because they've already done the mental process. So that's another really strong point. Then you can see the 3 columns: to do, busy, and done. That sort of is the radiator where you can see, okay, this is the work going on. Very, very transparent. You can check, is there enough work on there? Have they broken it down in small chunks enough, or are there too big chunks there? Do we see progress? Do we see things moving on the board? Because ideally, between each and every stand-up, but I want to touch that later on, that there should be progress. You should see things moving. Then on the top bottom left, they have a definition of done. These are their generic quality criteria. So what do they think when things are done? You know, this. So usually that comes also from the teacher, but it's usually collaboration. So these are the technical part. So if you have a paper, you want to have certain topics covered, you want to have the title page, you want to have your line spacing, all that sort of stuff, the overall requirements. Not on the content, because those are acceptance criteria, but on the format. The other thing they're having is a definition of fun. That's where they write down what they would need as a group to enjoy the learning process. And that could be anything from helping one another, being allowed to put on your headset in classroom, bringing candy, anything what you need to do your work, under the condition, obviously, that the group behind you or opposite of you will not have a problem with that, because otherwise, one learning benefit is a bottleneck for the other one. Then moving to the right, there's the burn down chart. That's where what I just said, that's a line you plot on how much work there is, when you want to have it done. It's an ideal line, and you can see if it's too flat, then you're not going fast enough, and if it's too steep, you're going very fast. And the fourth one is impediments, and it's like, what is blocking us? Now, could you imagine if you hang this up in the classroom, which might obviously every now and then be a challenge, but as a teacher, you only have to walk around. You can just watch and see where it's hanging, and you could just look behind and say, okay, I don't see any movement here. So you can zoom into a group, but you could also look and you think, oh, I think that things are going okay there. Maybe give them a compliment and, anything okay. So it's a very manageable way for a teacher, because you don't have to check their diaries if they write it down, when they need to deliver what, because they do that themselves. It's their planning. So they break it down in little chunks, and they manage the progress. So if you look at the things here, you could see the blocks of work, and they will just move that direction. So that's the canvas, which is a very powerful tool. And if you look at the process, it's, for those of you who are not familiar with Scrum, it's a 5-step process. So it's the beginning of a project or at the semester or whatever. You introduce the big essential question, or a topic, or project assignment, whatever you want to call it, because it depends on whatever scale you work. And the team starts working on sort of, okay, what do we need to do for that? And how are we going to break down the work? So this is what I just before called the mental process of going, okay, if this is what you want us to deliver, what do we need to do? And it's an iterative process between the groups. They can ask one another feedback. As they do, they write it on the canvas. So you could, if they get stuck, or if you think, well, they're missing the point, you can instruct them and say, could you go and have a look at group B or group C? That's their plan. Then they move towards the next thing, and then they're going to break it out, I would say, in very small tasks. So it's the more the detailed planning. So the first step is the overall planning. It's like, okay, what do we need to do? The second one is, how are we going to do it? And they're going to determine the learning and collaboration strategies, and they're going to estimate the work. And for those of you familiar with Scrum, they're going to do that in story points. And the funny thing is always that it's easier to explain to kids than it is to grown-ups. So whenever I do training class for grown-ups, they feel like, relative estimation doesn't work because it's not really predictable. And I've had a few times, luckily, the opportunity to help a teacher in the classroom setting it up. And you could tell that the students were correcting the teacher because they by far already discovered how things would work, and told the teacher now that she was incorrect. So they're going to do that. They get that very quickly. And that gives them the tool to monitor their progress. So they can self-monitor the progress. They can compare with others the progress. So peer review and peer support, but also peer pressure is a very strong element in this way of working, I would say, in a positive sense. then they start doing the work, and they have a frequent stand-up or a daily scrum, it's called, and at the board, something like here behind me, and they have the discussion, you know, like, okay, what have we done? They move the sticky notes. Is there anything blocking us? Are there things we need from our teacher, or do we miss any preconditions? And any adjustments in the plan. So they reach out to the teachers, okay, if we need to do this, then maybe we should drop that or whatever. So that's their mini planning session, and where they align, are we on track? Are we doing the right things? And do we need help? And they all do that very, very disciplined. So it takes only maybe 1 or 2 lessons, and then you would have your and I'm talking about children from the age from 11 to 15, 16. But they come in the classroom, they know what to do. They take up these flaps, these canvases, they hang them on either with magnets on metal strips or with tape, various ways to do that. And they just start, you know, they don't need instructions because they've created their own instructions. They know where they are, and they just do it. So that's a really amazing thing to see, I would say. Particularly if you talk about education, the lower end of the scale in terms of intelligence, people very having learning disorders and stuff like that. I've seen some really good experience. That the first time I'll never forget was on a Monday morning, and I came in and I thought, how can you cope with that as a teacher? Because it was like a zoo. It was like monkeys everywhere. There was yelling, screaming, and stuff like that. And it was like two times I did an instruction there, and then these guys were coming in and say, "Hey, we can start again." And it was well with energy, but not over the top, so to speak. So then the fourth stage is at the end of the process, is where they actually demonstrate the work. Yeah, so there could be either a presentation, could be a paper, it could be a play, it could be. Also here, I always advise, be creative. So usually we have a demonstration in terms of an assessment, but I much rather have them create an assessment and then show it and then share it and then let them give feedback. Why do you think Group A's assessment is better than Group B? What's missing in Group B? And how could they improve? And what would be, you know, all those are the good discussions I think you should have in a classroom, rather than the results of the test by itself. And then the cherry on the cake, so to speak, is the last step, and that's the reflection on how do we grow. So they take some time to reflect on themselves as a group and individuals. How did we do? And there's, you know, various retrospective techniques for that, templates, where they you know, go and have a look at themselves and what did we do and where can we improve and how did we learn and what should we do differently. And that's the final step in the process. And then it starts again. And then either they're going to change groups because they have learning objectives, and based on the reflection that they say, okay, I want to do this, or I want to be, you know, I've been in a group with where I was very good at presenting, but I'm in a group with very strong presenters. So I want to be in a group with where they don't have that skill, where I can use my skill there, or I can learn some other skills. So those are the 5 steps. So I would say this is pretty much the whole process in a nutshell. And I hope that also for those people who are not familiar with Scrum, it does make a little bit of sense to you. So if there's any questions, please ask them now, because then I can clarify, because for me, it's all pretty straightforward, but I can imagine, based on my experience with teachers, that it can be overwhelming.
And while we wait for maybe some questions on this, just to check, about 20 minutes more, right, Arno?
Yep. What's the time? I've just completely lost track of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. So I just want to make sure that we understand what the process is, some of the background. I could touch some of the benefits for the teacher and for the students if you've already not taken that conclusion yourself. So yeah, let me know if there's any questions, because I want to make the most of it. Did we check if we check the learning objectives? Are there, because I think some of it we covered already based on the framework.
Yeah, so no further questions that I see in the chat. As for the learning objectives, we had the combination of traditional and agile. So maybe touch around that one.
There is a nice slide on that one. I don't have to check where I've got it. Let me check. Yeah, I think this one. This is not a academic model, but it's something I came up with about five years ago, when I thought, what do I see? And if we talk about how it works with traditional education or more experimental types of education, then if you look at the black line in the graph, then you could scrum a traditional subject. You could do a language, you could do math, you could do geography as a subject, and you could do scrumming on that. Then those, in my opinion, are not the most effective way of learning, because it's a very siloed approach, and it doesn't say anything about what you can do with it and how you're going to do with it. But even there, if you do Scrum, you will have some increase, because you will have groups, you will have a bit more autonomy, you would have reflection in there. So that's still a benefit. But if you move towards the right, and then you go towards more to context education, where they will do more assignment-based type of work. So like I always remember one of Riley's assignments was in chemistry, was like, okay, there you go, as a group, and you're gonna find out how much copper there is in or how much gold there is in a mobile phone. And I won the paper on that, and just use all the techniques and all the things we have been talking about chemistry, and use that. So you move towards the right, the effectiveness of the traditional learning goes up. But if you start scrumming that, it increases exponentially. And if you move a bit further up, and if you combine subjects, so it's like, we have a word for that in Dutch, but it's more like the project-based education, I would say. Where they sort of start combining subjects, you see an even further increase. And you could also apply more of the Scrum concepts in that group, because you move towards a more, how would I say it, a sort of vanilla type of Scrum, so to speak. And the same is true if you go to an open project, and you say, okay, guys, you work with whomever you want in school, whatever you want to do, get the right people around, work with an external client, then you could perfectly Scrum it, and then there is a huge increase in effectiveness. And so does that answer the question on how it works with versus traditional education? I don't know whose question it was, but you can also unmute yourself if you want.
Yes, please do. And so you said for multidisciplinary projects or learning, that's where you can also, maybe that's the word for combining subjects.
Yeah, definitely.
Because then it looks more like a cross-functional team or a more complex product, and then of course the value is bigger. In the meantime, we also have a new question, which is, has there been any attempt of implementing this learning approach in the NGO sector? And we did answer the traditional Agile question. So,
okay, cool. Any attempt in learning? I think what I see nowadays, there is hardly a sector where it's not being where there is no attempt of implementing it, and all with a diversity, I would say, or with a variety of success rate, because we could see nowadays, and if you Google on Amazon books written, so I know people who are involved with HR, agility and Scrum in HR, education, research, anything government. So it's getting more and more widely adopted. But having that said, I would say that particularly the more traditional type of organizations, such as NGOs, another government, are slower in the adoption rate than other sectors, I would say.
And as we are talking about, we have also two questions regarding that. So one of the learning objective was kind of like, how do I get people on board with this? So how do I sell this? And you mentioned the benefits. And we have also Carla asking, what do you think about adoption by teachers? Is it easy or difficult?
So it's a number of questions. I'll start with the last one. And there's a huge spread with teachers, but I've over the last 5 years, I've been working with teachers. I'm going to say this a few here, but I think it can be a very difficult crowd to work with. They are very autonomous in their operation, I would say. They have a strong curriculum, but as soon as the door closes, so to speak, it's their territory. They're going to do it how they're going to do it. Having that said, that I also come across teachers who are very innovative and are really eager to pick it up. But in general, I see that there's a huge legacy of people having a knee-jerk reaction of trying to train like they have been trained, because what was good for me is still good for you. And it's not on purpose, definitely not. But I would say it makes it somewhat difficult. So it's not an easy journey. The other thing I think what's really hampering them is that, and by saying that, I really owe them respect, because there's a lot of stuff coming at them. New initiative, every time new initiatives, they have a full agenda. They run from one thing to another. The government thinks of something new, they have to implement it. The school thinks of something new, they have to implement it. And even if they decide that they like this way of working, I've not seen many schools yet who are from an educational institution fully embrace this and support it. So you can imagine one of the things we say, if you start doing this, do it at least with 2 or 3 people, because it's a mind-changing thing. It's like, I don't know if you ever saw the video. I think it was even Carlisle or something, but he did an experiment with the reversed steering on the bike, and he was sort of saying that you really have to dislearn something. So it's something you have to sort of switch in your mind. So it's a challenge, and I've had teachers and they said, well, I like this way of working, but I think our students will have a problem with it. And then I say, well, this is the problem, that you think that they'll have a problem with it. And that means that you are not yet ready. You are not convinced to do the experiment. So it's Is
it because it's high risk for them? It's quite a high risk if they're changing. No one else. Yeah,
they're under pressure. So they would like to do this, but it's they have to let go of things, because it's a completely different way, rather than you telling them how to get from A to B.
We have a thing where we suggest that, to change the way people teach, you need to change the assessment. So yeah, flip the assessment. If the assessment's about all the things that you've been talking about, then they'll need the Scrum bit to be able to achieve that.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it's a good one.
Changing the other elements.
Yeah, I like that. So it's mixed, but I would say if you look at adoption curves, we are still in the early beginning. So the one thing what sometimes works against us is that people become so enthusiastic about it that we also get people who think it's a silver bullet and they can just do a 2-day training and gone are their problems. And it's like, it's like your driving license. You first do your theory, and then comes the practice. And then all of a sudden you find yourself doing all these things together. You think, my God, how am I going to master that? So on paper, it's like we have 3 roles, we have a couple of artifacts, we have a few events. It fits on 20 pages. How difficult can it be? But it's like playing chess. I can explain it to you in 5 minutes. Does that make you a good chess player? By far not. And I think that's where it's been highly underestimated. And the fact is that the teachers are really, really busy. That's not their fault, but there's a lot of things, at least in the Netherlands. And I've heard some of the same things, because I think at least in the Western countries, our educational systems do not differ that much from one another, I'd say.
Yeah, and as you talked, we also have this discussion around the growth mindset and the elitism in the learning. So I also shared the video about there was a research, I think, in the States around how growth mindset in upbringing and education actually hinders growth mindset and learning. And I'll just share that they had a grading that says not there yet. So you don't fail, you're not there yet. So it's an interesting concept also.
It's like saying, if children say, I don't know how to do it, then you say, no, I don't know how to do it yet. So it's the stretch. Well, what's her name again? I just heard it this week, and I thought, I've got to remember her name, because I always forget her name. And again, I forgot her name. This lady, Carol Dweck. She's the author of Growth Mindset. And another fantastic video is on the reflection on the educational system, is the one from Sir Ken Robinson. He really lays out what is currently wrong with how we've designed the system. And if you look at my graph, then obviously my personal ambition is that if we could move our education more like project-based, where you could have building blocks of knowledge, and where you could sort of, like what if your education would be like Lego? It's like you get a big box of blocks and some instructions, and you build something beautiful out of it. And then I'm not the one to tell you that it should be a house with a window on this side or with a porch or not. That's up to you. So that would be my far-fetched, my dot on the horizon, so to speak, if we could have that.
I was just thinking about the system as a whole, and I know there's the university in Copenhagen that is all problem-based. Everything they do is problem-based. So
wow.
If we get that at university, then the schools might shift to reflect that. Lower down.
Universities are a bit ahead in that part, and that's why I'm saying
to the worst.
Yeah, it's really a shame if we could move that, because what I've seen, and that's something I probably cannot express here in this presentation, but if you see what happens and if you feel what happens in the classroom, that is just emotionally overwhelming, because then you think, wow, why don't we do all our education like this? Because they are happy, they take ownership, they do their homework, they love what they do, they interact with one another. So if you look what I just said with the 21st century skills, they work in groups, so they do collaboration, they do reflection on their learning. So not all, but I would say 75 to 80% of these 21st century skills, they're in the framework. So you don't have to think of how do I get all these skills addressed for my students. It's just that apply the framework, give them the right boundaries. Mind you, it's difficult to give them the boundaries, because we grown-ups find it easier to tell people what steps they should take to get somewhere than to define the boundaries that they can self-organize, because that's how we've been trained. So if you want to do this, then you need to do this, that, and that. So,
but you've got quite a strong scaffold, haven't you, for letting people do things in the Scrum framework?
Definitely, yeah.
Like space for them to work in that has rules and ceremonies and all the rest of it. So that's quite powerful, I think, because a lot of people, when they start to do problem-based stuff, they just go, oh, you're going to do some problem-based stuff. Here's the problem, fix the problem. And there's no, it needs a lot more scaffolding and framework around.
Definitely. So that's I think for the teaching side of the equation, so to speak, is the most challenging part. How do you create the right problem? How do you define it? How do you create the right acceptance criteria? And how do you create the right boundaries without telling them how they should organize it? So to give you an example, you could think of, they sometimes have to do design a house or a shopping mall or whatever, and then they have to cut it out in wood and make this little piece of it. Then you sort of, you have to think, okay, what are the criteria? So you could have maybe something in materials, it's got to be 3D. And normally we'd say, oh yeah, you have to cut it out in wood and it needs to be this and this big. But if you say, okay, it's got to fit in a box for relocation, because those are the standard sizes. It's got to fit in that box. It's got to be 3D, and it's got to have these elements in it. And yes, sometimes they come up with very creative things you haven't thought of. And then maybe next time you have to sort of sharpen your boundaries again. But at least it gave them the freedom to fully use their creativity and collaborate on a working product.
Yeah, and Arno, just to make sure about the time, because I see that it's a very lively discussion, and you mentioned you want to cover a few things, so we have around 5 minutes for what you wanted to cover, and then go into closing. And also there's a question, maybe a quick one. Will people get the presentation afterwards?
I'm happy with that. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's no problem.
Okay,
I'll turn it into PDF and I'll share it with you, and then I'm trusting that you will share it with the participants.
Okay.
So if there's anything I need to cover, I'm just thinking out loud now what I need to cover, because we have the framework, we have the success, so we have some of the challenges. If we talk about, these are the values, this was a little exercise we could have done, but looking at the time, this might not be the right thing. But the values in our classroom should be freedom, commitment, autonomy, personal growth, ownership, trust, focus, and I forgot that one. That's a challenging one. I've changed it recently.
Authenticity?
Authentic, yeah. So these are very important values. And there was a question before, like, how difficult is it for teachers? This is what they need to understand. So rather than saying, okay, you take away the framework and now you're going to do the framework, I would say, no, first understand what it means. If you apply these values in your classroom, what does it mean for you? What do you need to change in your way of teaching? Because you can go and start with a canvas like this and then think we've changed it, but that's just on the surface. The real change is that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Real change is underneath. Do you understand the values? Do you feel that? Do you you're going to live these values to make this a success? And if you don't believe in autonomy, but you still use, and I've seen that happening, these sort of tools, this canvas, then it's just something to smack around the head. You've not done your homework. I can see it here and here.
It's quite scary, Arno. It's quite, I started doing problem-based learning in one of my master's courses last year. And when you give up control, you go, hey, it's up to you now. It's like really scary because you can't do anything about it. They'll go where they want to go. And it's like change, as you say, it's a value you've got to learn or unlearn.
Yeah, and it's and I fully understand it. It's like, it's like if you swing on a rope and you have to let go and to grab the next one, and that little bit in between makes that a lot of people don't let go of it, because it's like, what's going to happen? And what if I miss it? Will I drop down? What will happen? So I always advise, if you do this, then do it in a group where you can have like some sort of vision together. Like, what did you do? What worked with you? Because if you do this on your own, it's very, unless you are very, very motivated and determined to make it a success, chances are that you get demotivated because you might miss certain parts, and then it will not work anymore. So if you have this intervision, I would say 2 or 3 people, but if it's a bigger group, even the better. That really helps you to reflect. So you should apply the same process on a teaching level as amongst yourselves as educators or teachers, as well as with your students. But I fully agree, Carl, that it is, you have to let go, and
it's also
and every now and then
identity as well, isn't it? It's quite a big change in identity that people have to switch. If they've been teaching for a long time, they have to switch their role into facilitator, coach. Being in charge, basically, of everything. So in a way, it's nicer. It's work.
I think we have some teachers who get that right from the start, and I really like that, because then you see it and it's just flying, because they've been feeling that something had to change, and all of a sudden it's like, they already know the movement, how to fly, but now you're giving them the wings, like, wow, they just go with it. But there's also a large proportion where they think, well, I don't know. Then you talk to them and they say, yeah, we're doing this. We're doing Scrum in the classroom. And then you ask a few questions and you think, I wouldn't call that Scrum, to be honest. They leave out certain parts because they think, that's a little bit difficult. And it might be difficult, but it's an essential part.
Is that similar to how you get with, in Scrum in business? Similar kind of issues around adoption of Scrum?
Definitely. Yeah, I see a lot of similarities and the good thing, or the best thing I see is that those people who really want to train in this, they know and they feel that this is a natural way of learning, natural way of being. And I would say that the biggest success of Scrum is not so much in how we apply it with large organizations, but with the people who have ingrained it and really embody the values, and they breathe it, and it has changed their lives, and it's like it spreads like that. But if we say, okay, how much success do we have with organizations, I would still say it's still in its infancy. I would say very, very, we're still making baby steps there. Yeah. Let me see.
Okay. Any closing words? I'm trying to be the good host, right? So that you're not late for any party you're going after this.
Yeah.
It looks like I'm pushing you away. I would love to talk for hours, probably.
I've a little bit of time left, I see. So I just got a message. So that's okay. But anyway, there's some point in time where we have to wrap up anyway. So. Let's hear it from the group, whatever they would like to get out of the last few minutes. See if there's anything in the chat still there.
So I think we covered most of it. I found the video for the bike. So I think we covered all the references.
That video is, if you want to have a quick look on how difficult unlearning is and how it's in our mind, then you understand all of a sudden how difficult it is for teachers, but also in companies to start working like this.
And you touched on something that I think is very important to say when we talk about agile coaching and adopting Scrum, and that you need to have the empathy for the people you are going in and you're trying to change, or even how they are evaluated. So what you just said, look at the video and understand how difficult that is for someone who's teaching maybe for 30, 40 years. Like, don't do it like that. Do it like this. That's not really working. Like, so that can be very difficult, especially if you phrase it like that. So a little bit empathy, or more of it, rather, and you yourself doing coaching, going with the coach and maybe saying, you know, what's the problem you have as a teacher?
Yeah.
And how can we solve this versus here's this new thing, it's better than yours, do that.
Yeah, one size fits all. Well, what I also do, and I'm not taking that stance very often in education, but what I do in my professional life in organizations is always when I come in and I say, okay, guys, let's get one thing clear. No one is 0% agile. That's non-existent, because we all have some in us, and I would say even quite a lot. No one is 100% agile, because that's non-existent as well. So now the only thing we have to discover is where you are at the moment, and what your ambitions are, and what stretch we can make. So sometimes as agile coaches, we are highly motivated and very eager to help the client. And then sometimes being disappointed if it doesn't go fast enough, or we don't understand that they're doing things right. And then, you know, when they start complaining, I will say, guys, this is why we have a job. You know, so don't expect them to do the things right from the start, but set your expectations based on where they are and how much of a stretch they can make. And if I work with a large organization like I'm doing now with the bank, that stretch is maybe 1 or 2%. And if I come into a startup, we can make a stretch maybe of 25%. But it's one thing always to keep in mind. And I think, thinking out loud now, education would be a lot better if we would have that same stance towards, you know, how fast things can go, because it relates to the whole context and your ambitions. Yeah.
So I don't see any more questions. It's just a great meeting, great talk. Thank you, Arno. So that is coming in. Questions now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just afraid that everybody walked out. I said no more questions, but it's just that no. So if there's no more questions, you know, and I'm pretty sure that you know, after good night's sleep, there'll probably be more questions. So please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, just for a connection, you know. And then if you have any questions, then I'm more than happy to answer them.
Yeah, thanks.
And I would add, like, I've seen people talking to each other on this chat. So maybe you include those people on your LinkedIn too. And let's, you know, tap in that wisdom of the crowd that Arno was speaking about.
Yeah, sure.
I think that's a really
let's build a community, because everybody has, to some extent, has any relationship with education. You've been involved yourself, you have children, or maybe if you don't have children, you have a nephew or a niece who's in education. And I think particularly those people already with an agile background, but all the teachers, also teachers who have an affinity with agility, let's work together and see how we can change the world.
small ambition then.
Yeah, my dream, I'm going to share with you my personal dream. My personal dream is that within a years and a half or 2 time, I would like to travel the world. I've done that many years ago. I've traveled a lot for my work when I visiting all countries. I like different cultures. And I said to my wife, you know, our son is living on himself now. I would love to travel the world for a year. And then I would start teaching it free of charge in various places around the world. You know, just probably looking for some sponsorship to accommodate the cost, and then helping the schools to embrace it, because I think looking at the pressure on our educational system, that we should help them there and support them there. So that's something I would love to do, free of charge, going through a number of countries, being there with the children, helping them to set it up, seeing the smiling faces and joyful children. That's my dream for maybe 2 or 3 years out.
Excellent.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you all for your attendance and your interesting questions and the dialogue.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Arno. It's really, that's probably one of the best explanations of education and Scrum I've heard. And I've heard a few, but that was
Cool.
the better ones, I think, because it's
Okay.
don't sort of push it and you see and you show how it works, you know, how it might work or how you might be able to use it. So I think it's cool. Maybe we'll have you.
Nice.
Maybe in a year, when you're on your tour, come to our university and talk to some of our teachers.
Definitely. I'm looking forward to that, Carl.
Yeah, good. I'll keep that in my mind. Further, after.
And just to check, you haven't visited Serbia yet, right?
No. Well, I've been driving through Serbia before, but I wouldn't call that a visit. No.
Okay, so then you have to come and showcase at the Scrum somewhere.
Sure, no problem.
As you said,
love to do
so
that.
I'll keep you in mind then in the next 2 or 3 years. And help you.
Yeah,
it's a shared dream, let's say. So
Yeah.
let's see how we can work on that.
Cool.
Okay, then I would then close with this. So Arno, thank you very much for your time and for a lovely talk and discussion and willingness to really engage. And thanks everyone with engaging with us and really making this a dialogue. And as we said, so this was being recorded. The recording will be shared. We'll see if it's going to go on YouTube or not, and share on social networks. And Arno will send us the PDF, so we will distribute that also. So with that, I wish everyone a very pleasant evening. And to get really inspired by this and build a better education as you go. As Arno said, we all come from it and we all influence that in some way. So let's jump at that.
Cool.